Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. My name is Dr. Muhammad Shafiq, and I'm a lecturer in the Department of Islamic and Pakistan Studies Trust. The course I'm teaching you is called Introduction to Logic, and the course code is PHI 101, and this is lecture number 17. Today we are going to discuss what is syllogism and what are the types of syllogism. So let's start. The outline of this lecture consists upon the definition and explanation of what is syllogism, as well as what are the different types of syllogism. So before starting to discuss what is syllogism, I'll just take you back to the introductory lecture in which we discussed uh, what is logic meant for. Well, logic is basically the study of those methods and principles which distinguish between correct reasoning and incorrect reasoning. Now, what is the relationship of syllogism with reasoning? Basically, syllogism is also a kind of reasoning. It's a kind of argument, a specific argument, which we are going to discuss in detail later on. But I just wanted to connect it with the basic idea of logic. So, as we always try to dig out if there are any problems with the argument, or as we try to dig out the difference between the correct reasoning and incorrect reasoning, we always look into those methods and principles and laws which devise our reasoning. So, syllogism is a kind of reasoning which has got its own rules and regulations or principles. So we have to follow these, after which we will be able to present our argument, syllogistic argument validly. And in order to understand what is syllogism, we also need to understand what are the different types of syllogism. So now we are going to move on to discuss what is syllogism. So what is syllogism? Syllogism is a three-part logical argument based on deductive reasoning in which two premises are combined to arrive at a conclusion. Now, I hope you remember when we discussed the definition of an argument, that what is an argument? An argument basically consists upon two parts. One is called premise, the other one is called conclusion. And the premises support conclusion, while conclusion is basically uh, deducted from the premises, or on the basis of premises we deduct, we actually arrive at a conclusion. Now, as you know, in an argument there could be more than two propositions. At least there should be two propositions in an argument, and maximum there could be thousands of propositions in an argument. But syllogism is a kind of an argument which consists on only three-part logical argument. It consists on three propositions, and in which two propositions are the premises, while the third one is called conclusion. Hence, it says syllogism is a three-part logical argument. It's basically an argument which has three parts, in which there are two premises, and the third one is conclusion. Now, if you remember, I told you earlier in defining argument that it is not necessary that conclusion would be the last proposition of an argument. Conclusion could be the first one, and after that, it could be supported with premises. So the order could be different, but the number of propositions or the number of part of this logical argument must consist of one three parts. So long as the premises of the syllogism are true and the syllogism is correctly structured, the conclusion will be true. When we were discussing kinds of argument, if you remember, we discussed deductive argument. And the deductive argument is an argument in which premises support conclusion conclusively. And by conclusively, we mean to say that if premises are true, conclusion must be 100%. And syllogism basically is a kind of deductive argument. Hence it says that so long as the premises of the syllogism are true and syllogism is correctly structured, the conclusion will be true. An example of syllogism would be all mammals are animals. That's the first premise. Then all elephants are mammals. That's the second premise. Therefore, all elephants are animals. And this is the conclusion, which is basically drawn from these two premises, in which in first premise we admit that all mammals are animals, and in second premise we basically admit that all elephants are mammals. Now, combining these two premises, we can deduce a conclusion which says that all elephants are animals. So if we take these two premises to be true, the conclusion must be 100%. Another very important part of syllogism, or a very important point to be noted in this syllogism, is that in a syllogism, the more general premise is called the major premise. In this case, the proposition which says all mammals are animals is a major premise because it is more general. The more specific premise is called the minor premise. In this case, all elephants are mammals. This is a minor premise. And the conclusion joins the logic of the two premises. Therefore, all elephants are animals. So, in a syllogistic argument, which consists upon three parts, there are two premises and one conclusion. And in these two premises, the more general premise is called the major premise, while the more specific premise is called the minor premise. So, this is, in a nutshell, what is syllogism. Now, there are three types of syllogism, or again, if you remember when we were discussing the definition of a proposition and the kinds of propositions, we discussed that there are three types of propositions. So there are three kinds of propositions. One is called categorical proposition, which is a simple or single proposition. And another one is called hypothetical proposition. And the third one is called disjunctive proposition. Now, similarly, in syllogism, there are three types of syllogism: categorical syllogism, hypothetical syllogism, and disjunctive syllogism. So let's start with the categorical syllogism. It has the same kind of ingredients which categorical proposition would have. So a categorical syllogism is an argument consisting of exactly three categorical propositions, two premises and a conclusion. in which there appear a total of exactly three categorical terms, each of which is used exactly twice. The other premise which links the middle and minor premise we call minor premise. Now, as I said, that kind of propositions, there are three types of propositions, categorical propositions. So, in definition of syllogism, I told you syllogism is a kind of argument which consists of exactly three parts. And a categorical syllogism must have categorical propositions of its ingredients or its three parts. So, categorical syllogism is basically that syllogism, that kind of deductive argument which consists upon exactly three categorical propositions. So in this argument or in this categorical syllogism, you have to use categorical propositions. You cannot use disjunctive or hypothetical propositions in categorical syllogism. So categorical syllogism is the one which consists upon three parts, and those three parts are for sure they are categorical propositions, in which there are two premises and one conclusion. And as I told you a few minutes earlier, that one premise is called a major premise, the other premise is called minor premise, and the third proposition is called the conclusion. Now, a major premise must have major terms, but the minor premise must have minor terms. So, the example of categorical syllogism is all primates are mammals. That's the first premise. The second premise is all human beings are primates. And the conclusion says, therefore, all human beings are mammals. Now, in this argument, this categorical syllogistic argument, if you look closely, as I told you earlier, the more general premise is called the major premise, and the more specific premise is called the minor premise. Now, in this stance, major premise is the one which says all human beings are primates, while all primates are mammals is the premise which is a minor premise. And obviously, therefore, all human beings are mammals. This proposition is the conclusion of this categorical syllogism. So, this is categorical syllogism in a nutshell. Now, let's move on to hypothetical syllogism. As I said earlier, that the categorical proposition consists, the categorical syllogism consists upon exactly three categorical propositions. While, on the other hand, hypothetical syllogism would naturally consist upon hypothetical propositions. If you remember, I told you what is a hypothetical proposition. Hypothetical proposition is a proposition in which there is a condition involved, in which there is a phrase of condition, such as if and then is involved. But in categorical syllogism, we had three categorical propositions. In hypothetical syllogism, all of the propositions do not necessarily have to be hypothetical. Only one premise, if it is hypothetical, then we can say this is this argument is a hypothetical syllogism. In classical logic, hypothetical syllogism is a valid argument from form which is syllogism having a conditional statement for one or both of its premises. So, conclusion does not necessarily have to be conditional statement or hypothetical proposition. Even the premises, both of the premises, do not necessarily have to be conditional or hypothetical proposition. Even if there is only one proposition or one premise of an argument which is hypothetical or conditional, that would mean it is a hypothetical syllogism. If the basic principle, if you remember, as I told you earlier, if and only if it consists upon three parts or three propositions. So, two premises, one conclusion, that is the basic requirement of an argument in order to be called a syllogistic argument. And if one of the premises or both the premises are conditional or hypothetical proposition, or even if one of the premises is hypothetical or conditional proposition, that basically means this argument is a hypothetical syllogism. Example says that if the second native told the truth, then only one native is politician. That's the first premise. Second premise is the second native told the truth. And we draw the conclusion on the basis of these two premises. We say, therefore, only one native is politician. So this is hypothetical syllogism. Now let's move on to disjunctive syllogism. This is the third type of syllogism, and again I would take you back to the definition of proposition, in which there is a kind of proposition which is called disjunctive proposition. And as it is evident from its name, disjunctive, these are the propositions which carry the phrase of disjunction, such as either or in negative terms, neither nor. So the proposition which contains a phrase which disjuncts, which basically disjoins two propositions or two parts of a proposition, that is called a disjunctive proposition. Now, as I told you earlier, in hypothetical syllogism, there must be at least one proposition or one premise which is conditional or hypothetical. Similarly, in disjunctive syllogism, there must be at least one premise which is a disjunctive proposition. Could be both of the premise or could be one of the premise, but does not necessarily mean that all the propositions are disjunctive. But it has to fulfill the basic requirement to be called syllogistic argument, which is it must contain three propositions, two premises and a conclusion. Now, one of the premises must be a disjunctive premise. That is why it is called disjunctive syllogism. So it says, in classical logic, disjunctive syllogism is a valid argument form, which is a syllogism having a disjunctive statement for one of its premises. Such as one of its premises does not necessarily mean all the premises. Could be one of the premises or both of the premises. So let us examine this example. It says, either Akram or Farhan has secured the highest grade in the exam. Right? This is the first premise. The second premise is Akram has not secured the highest grade. And on the basis of these two premises, we conclude with the justice conclusion which says, therefore, Farhan has secured the highest grade in the exam. So, this is what we call distinctive syllogism. Now, in syllogism, we have to identify the term and the conclusion. How would we come to know that which of the proposition is conclusion and which are the premises? And also, which one is the minor premise and which one is the major premise? Because we are going to need these when we move on to diagrammic illustration of such arguments, which is called Venn diagrams. But for the time being, let's concentrate upon identifying the terms and conclusion. So as I said that earlier, that more general premise is called major premise, while the more specific premise is called the minor premise. And what is the conclusion? If you remember while discussing different kinds of propositions, I have told you there are different indicators of propositions which can tell us, which can help us identify that these are the conclusions, such as using the term therefore, so, hence, that is why, conclusively, etc., etc. So all those propositions which contain such kind of terms, they are obviously conclusions. So it's simply kind of, you may call it simply kind of common sense. But on a lighter note, as you know, that common sense is the sense which is not always common. So I had to explain these to you. Now let's come back to the terms, identifying the terms. As I said, all those premises which are more general are called major premises. Now the term which is specifically used in major premise is called major term. Like in the first premise, which is all primates are mammals, if you closely look, the term which is identified in red color is called major term, which is basically the predicate of this proposition. Subject is primates and the predicate is mammals. So the predicate of major premise is always from major term, while the predicate of minor premise, which is the second one, second proposition, which says all human beings are primates, that is, which is in green color, that's the predicate of second proposition. That is called middle term. While the subject of the second proposition or second premise, which is in blue color, that is called minor term. So there are three terms in an argument, in a syllogistic argument: major term, minor term, and middle term. The middle term is a term which is shared by both of the premises. The minor term is the subject of the second premise, while the predicate of the first premise is called major term. And as you know, as I told you, how to identify conclusion. Conclusion carries specific terms or wording such as so, therefore, hence, etc., etc. These are the conclusion, excuse me, conclusion of an argument. Now, all primates are mammals. It's a major premise. All human beings are primates. That is a minor premise. And therefore, all human beings are mammals. That is the conclusion of this syllogistic argument. Now, this was the definition of an argument, syllogism or syllogistic argument, and three types of different syllogistic arguments. I hope you got these, and I hope you understood it right. These are the two books which you can consult for further explanation. And if you have any questions or if you have any confusion or if you want to comment on any of these slides or on this lecture, please do get in touch and let us know so we can discuss it before starting the next lecture. Till then, thank you very much and Allah Hafiz.